Hello again. Welcome back to week 48 of year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is day 1. We're doing a little bit of an experiment with the audio this week, so uh, uh, I'm curious if I sound any different, so just to compare this with others. Anyway, that's beside the point, just so you know why if I sound different, that's why. So, anyway, day 1. Last time we read one of the visions of Daniel the prophet as he prayed for the end of the captivity and the restoration of Jerusalem, and received a vision that all would be restored after a period of 70 weeks, or 77s, which are generally understood to refer to a period of 70 times 7 years, or 490 years. Thus, the dates involved are of some interest to us. So this time we're going to go back and read from the book of Ezra, which speaks of the actual return of the people of Judea, which is to say, members of the tribes of Judah and Levi and Benjamin, their return to the city of Jerusalem. For our reference, Cyrus began to reign in 539 BC, and he allowed the Jews to return in 538 BC, roughly speaking. Darius became king in 522 BC after Cyrus and his son Cambyses died. And in 520 BC, Darius appointed Zerubbabel, a descendant of the kingly line of Judah, as governor in Judea, enabling him to complete the work that had begun in 538. So we're going to see this story play out in detail in the selections that follow, but just to keep that in mind, Cyrus started to reign in 539. In 538, he let the Jews go back, telling them they could rebuild the temple. They met with some opposition, so they had to wait 20-some years until Darius became king, and Darius appointed Zerubbabel, a descendant of the last kings of Judah, as the governor, so they finished. Anyway, that's just me repeating what I said, but anyway, this is the beginning of Ezra chapter 1. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia, so that he sent a herald throughout all his kingdom, and also in a written edict he declared, Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of those among you who are of his people, may their God be with them, are now permitted to go up to Jerusalem in Judah and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And let all survivors, in whatever place they reside, be assisted by the people of their place with silver and gold, with goods and with animals, besides freewill offerings for the house of God in Jerusalem. The heads of the families of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose spirit God had stirred, they got ready to go up and rebuild the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. All their neighbors aided them with silver vessels, with gold, with goods, with animals, and with valuable gifts, besides all that was freely offered. King Cyrus himself brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed in the house of his gods. King Cyrus of Persia had them released into the charge of Mithredath the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. And this was the inventory: gold basins, 30, silver basins, 1,000, knives, 29, gold bowls, 30, other silver bowls, 410, other vessels, 1,000. The total of the gold and silver vessels was 5,400. All these Sheshbazzar brought up when the exiles were brought up from Babylonia to Jerusalem. And then, we're going to skip this, but the names and tribes of those who returned were listed. Then we continue in chapter 2, verse 64. The whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,337, and they had 200 male and female singers. They had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. So most of them walked. That's me cutting in. As soon as they came to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of families made freewill offerings for the house of God to erect it on its site. According to the resources they gave to the building fund, 61,000 derricks of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly robes. The priests, the Levites, and some of the people lived in Jerusalem and its vicinity, and the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants lived in their towns, and all Israel in their towns. This is chapter 3. When the 7th month came, and the Israelites were in the towns, the people gathered together in Jerusalem. Then Jeshua son of Jozadak with his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel with his kin, set out to build the altar of the God of Israel, to offer burnt offerings on it, as prescribed in the law of Moses the man of God. They set up the altar on its foundations, because they were in dread of the neighboring peoples, and they offered burnt offerings upon it to the Lord morning and evening. And they kept the festival of booths, as prescribed, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number, according to the ordinance, as required for each day. And after that the regular burnt offerings, the offerings at the new moon, and at all the sacred festivals of the Lord, and the offerings of everyone who made a freewill offering to the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord. But the foundation of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. So they gave money to the masons and the carpenters, and food, drink, and oil to the Sidonians and the Tyrians, to bring cedar trees from Lebanon to the sea, to Joppa, according to the grant that they had from King Cyrus of Persia. In the 2nd year after their arrival at the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and Jeshua son of Jozadak made a beginning, together with the rest of their people, the priests and the Levites, and all who had come to Jerusalem from the captivity. They appointed the Levites from 20 years old and upward to have the oversight of the work on the house of the Lord. And Jeshua with his sons and his kin, and Kadmiel and his sons Benui and Hodaviah, along with the sons of Henadad, the Levites, their sons and kin, together took charge of the workers in the house of God. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests in their vestments were stationed to praise the Lord with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, according to the directions of King David of Israel. And they sang responsively, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever toward Israel. And that's from one of the Psalms. And all the people responded with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the priests and Levites and heads of families, old people who had seen the first house on its foundations, they wept with a loud voice when they saw this house, though many shouted aloud for joy, so that the people could not distinguish the sound of the joyful shout from the sound of the people's weeping, for the people shouted so loudly that the sound was heard far away. When the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the Lord the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of families and said to them, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of King Esarhaddon of Assyria, who brought us here." But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the rest of the heads of families in Israel said to them, "You shall have no part with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build to the Lord the God of Israel, as King Cyrus of Persia has commanded us." Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build, and they bribed officials to frustrate their plan throughout the reign of King Cyrus of Persia and until the reign of King Darius of Persia. And then some notes. The narrative leaves off here, around 538, 539 BC, with the local authorities working against the rebuilding of the temple. And this work was slowed or stopped because of this opposition through the reigns of Cyrus and Cambyses and into the reign of Darius. But at that time it was resumed, and it was completed while Darius was king, around the year 516 BC. At that time they celebrated the Passover there in the land of promise once again, with great joy. So, this shows us the end of the captivity, apparently. This shows us the beginnings of what becomes the province of Judea as we see it in the New Testament. This is the beginning of the rebuilding of the temple that is completed in passages that we'll see further on, and that is greatly beautified and made splendid by King Herod the Great, just before Jesus is born. Important points to make here. At this time, the leaders of the people are still the house of David. This Zerubbabel is the grandson, as it seems, of Jeconiah, who had been one of the last kings of Judah, and he is allowed to go back, and he is functioning as the leader, and they're given back the things that had been taken, but they don't have any authority in the land, and this seems to be what happens, that because they don't have any authority, then and they're far away from the capital. They're far away from Cyrus, who seems to be showing them some favor here. Um, well, but so the governors, the people who are still there, and it might be reading too much into it, but we could kind of take as a summary. These are sort of the ancestors, the forerunners of the Samaritans, and this is part of the reason for that ongoing tension between the Samaritans at the time of Jesus and the Israelites, the Jews here, because the Samaritans are people that were brought to the land by the Assyrians 100 years or so before the kingdom of Judah fell. They mixed and mingled together with the remnants of the Israelites. They were worshipping Yahweh, the God of Israel, but they were also still practicing some of the other things that their ancestral peoples, because they came from other lands that the Assyrians had conquered, and they repopulated. They did a transfer of population. So anyway, it was a mixed and troubled heritage. This would be the reason why Zerubbabel and the people of Judah and Benjamin don't allow them to join them in rebuilding the temple. They see this as a suspicious thing. They're pretending to be friends, but they actually want to corrupt the people once again. They're trying, as it seems, to obey the law and the guidance to Moses to not mingle, to not mix with the peoples of the land, but they're not doing it quite right. So anyway, we could say more about that, but I think for now let's leave it be, and we'll see you again shortly for day 2.